For the next lesson of logic, I want to discuss the difference between extension and intension. Now, if it's not been abundantly clear from just going through the class together, it should be beginning to be clear that each lesson is going to build on the previous lessons. Similarly, each unit will build on the previous units. So as we're still relatively close to the beginning of this course, if something way back from lesson 1, such as the difference between definition, term, and word, is a little bit fuzzy, or if it's getting a little bit fuzzy, go back and review that, because you're going to need to understand those three concepts in order to understand the concepts of genus and species relationship, or the purpose that we're doing there. And similarly, you're going to need to understand what a genus and species is in order to be able to understand what the extension and the intention of this way of categorization should be understood as. So these two words are notoriously confused with one another. And I'll give you that warning. When it comes to deciphering between the two of them, you will want to make sure that you're constantly reminding yourself which one's extension and which one's intention. Because on your first quiz, some of you will confuse those two things. It is almost inevitable. So I'm giving you that warning now. There will be differences about extension and intention. So what are these things? Well, if you recall, we discussed in class a larger overview of how to put genus and species relationships into everything that could possibly really exist, or at least every substance. And so at the top of that chart might be something like substances, and that genus can be divided into the species of material substances and immaterial substances. And now those species can themselves serve as their own genus. For example, for material substances, you might have animated material substances and inanimated or non-living material substances, and so on and so forth. Well, you'll notice that every time we get to a new section of that chart, that we're going to have a certain amount of things that could be qualified as that species. So for material substances, that just refers to anything that is a material substance. This paper, me, I am a material substance. The lamp that is next to me, the mirror that is behind me, and so on and so forth. And there will be a finite number of those material substances. So we used the example in class about my desk. Now, depending on how you define desk, there's probably exactly one desk in my classroom. We went through some odd examples, like does the table that you were all sitting at count as my desk? And most of us came to the answer of no. Does the place where my liturgies, the table that my liturgies are placed at, count as a desk? And most of us said no. But the important thing is that there is a finite amount of desks in my room. And we could similarly say that if we were to have a very strict definition of desk, there is a finite amount of desks ever in existence. And that would be the extension of the term desk. So the term desk, which we reference by saying the word desk, points to a finite number of things that fit that definition. Well, we also might want to recognize too then that the level of specificity that we have can be numbered in certain ways as well. So if I talk about a material substance, now I'm very, very high up on the genus species chart, and there's only a few qualifications that can apply to a material substance, i.e. that it is material and that it is a substance. But I could work my way down a little bit lower, and I could say, let's talk about furniture. Now you're going to have a bunch more qualifications that are going to meet that. So it needs to be a material, substance. It's probably not going to be something that's animated. It's going to be something that is probably made by human hands. We could get into an interesting conversation about what qualifies as those constraints for the individual substance. But the thing that we'll agree with is that there are different things that are going to constrain the species of a given genus. And when we talk about those constraints, that's when we're talking about the intention of a substance, or the intention of something on that genus and species relationship chart that we've talked about in class and that we've had on the board. And so, if I say, what is the intention of this desk? What I'm asking you is, what are the different constraints that I could use to define this desk and only this desk? Not opposed to like the tables or other things that are in my room. Now, the constraints that I offer hopefully will select all the different types of desks that there are. There's going to be a number of those constraints. We might say, let's say if I'm able to come up with a definition of a desk that only has 5 constraints, let's say that it's a material substance, that it's inanimate, that's able to stand on its own, that you can put papers on it, and maybe that it has a drawer. So those are 5 different constraints. And let's say that those 5 constraints uniquely signal a desk. Well, now I know that there are 5 constraints for a desk. That's the intention. The extension of those 5 constraints would just be how many substances exist in the world that meet those constraints. And so the interesting thing that we talked about in class is the more constraints I add, the more specific I am, the less substances that are going to exist in the actual world that will meet or map on to those constraints. If I end up upping the amount of constraints necessary for a desk, the intention of the desk, and I up that to 10, it's likely that there will be less substances that meet those qualifications. And so as the number of intensive constraints goes up, the intention goes up, the extension will go down. I kind of reversed my fingers there, but the extension will go down. The more specific I am about what substance I'm talking about, the less substances I will generally refer to. Now, this isn't always the case, right? I can add qualifications for a substance that will just never be met, right? I could say, I'm talking about the furniture that is smaller than the size of the planet Mars. And realistically, that's not going to make any smaller bifurcations on the genus species list. The amount of extension and intention will be the same under a characterization like that. But as a good rule of thumb, the more constraints that I offer, the less actual substances I can point to at the end of the day and say these meet these constraints. And so that's one of the reasons that this chart is really helpful for us to think through things. And it will be continuously helpful as we start asking, what does it mean for that substance to be that substance? Which we'll continue asking ourselves as we move into the next several lectures. I will see you all on Thursday when we will do a review for the quiz that we will have on Monday. Don't forget to be studying.